You know, narcissists don't walk in wearing a label. They don't announce themselves. They don't come with warning signs flashing above their heads. They come in with warmth, with charm, with attention that feels like sunshine after a long, bitter winter. And in that warmth, something inside you begins to melt and you don't even notice it at first. At first, they seem like everything you've been hoping to find. They listen intently. They praise generously. They seem drawn to your light. But over time, something shifts. You begin to question yourself, second-guessing your choices, your instincts. You start apologizing for things you never even thought twice about before. And without realizing it, you shrink. Just a little at first, and then a little more. Have you ever walked out of a conversation feeling smaller than when you walked in? Not because anyone yelled at you, not because there was a fight, but because something invisible was taken, a piece of your confidence, your certainty, your peace. That's the kind of erosion we're talking about. But this isn't just about identifying narcissists. We're not here to create a witch hunt. We're here for something far more important. This is about reclaiming yourself, your clarity, your inner stillness, and most of all, your peace. You see, narcissists don't steal your peace with violence. They do it with subtle distortions, with compliments that feel like affection but are really control, with kindness that comes with conditions. And by the time you realize it, you're tangled in a web of emotional confusion that doesn't feel like abuse. It feels like maybe it's just you. But let me tell you something, it's not just you. And you're not crazy. What you're experiencing is real. It's calculated, and it's more common than most people realize. And this is where stoicism steps in. Not like a warrior charging into battle, but like a mountain standing unmoved in the middle of a storm. Because when someone tries to manipulate you with flattery, a stoic mind doesn't react with rage. It doesn't lash out. It doesn't try to win or prove anything. It observes. It holds its ground. It remembers the truth that your worth isn't something anyone else gets to define. See, Stoicism teaches us that peace is not the absence of conflict. It's the refusal to be shaken by it. It's about choosing clarity over confusion, stillness over chaos, and boundaries over bitterness. It's saying, I don't need to argue with you to protect my peace. I don't need to convince you to stand in my truth. And I definitely don't need your permission to walk away. And here's the hard part, the part that's going to stretch you. You don't get there by changing the narcissist. You get there by changing what you give them access to. Your time, your energy, your emotional space, your attention, they feed on it. But when you stop offering it, when you stop playing the game, they lose control. And I know it's not easy, especially if the person is someone close, a partner, a parent, a friend, a boss. Sometimes it feels easier to keep the peace than to reclaim it. But let me ask you this. What has keeping the peace been costing you? Your joy, your voice, your identity. Stoicism reminds us that we are not here to manage other people's emotions. We are here to live in alignment with our own values. And the moment you stop living in reaction to someone else's approval, that's the moment you return to yourself. So if you've been feeling small, if you've been silencing yourself just to stay connected, this is your invitation to begin again. Not with drama, not with revenge, but with strength. Quiet, steady, unshakable strength. The kind that doesn't need attention to exist. The kind that doesn't rise and fall with anyone else's opinion. The kind that says, this is my mind, this is my peace, and I will no longer hand it over. That is the power of Stoicism. And that is the beginning of freedom. You've probably heard it before. You look great today, for once. Wow, you actually handled that really well, I'm surprised. You're pretty smart, I didn't expect that from you. At first, you might laugh it off. Maybe even say thank you out of habit. But something in your gut tightens. Something feels off. And that feeling, you're not imagining it. What you just received is what psychologists call a backhanded compliment and what narcissists use as one of their most disorienting weapons. On the surface, it sounds like praise, but underneath, it's a subtle cut. It plants a seed of doubt, a tiny crack in your confidence, and over time, enough of those cracks can break the strongest foundation. You begin to wonder, am I really that inconsistent? Was I only impressive because they expected me to fail? Maybe I do need their approval more than I thought. That's how it works, not by breaking you all at once, but by quietly reshaping how you see yourself. Let me ask you something. Have you ever stayed in a relationship, a job, a friendship where you constantly had to earn basic respect, where the compliments came laced with conditions, where you felt more confused than confident? That's no accident. That's control dressed in charm. See, the narcissist doesn't want you broken. They want you unsure, because uncertainty makes you easier to manage. You keep trying harder, you keep proving yourself, and you keep depending on their praise just to feel okay. But here's the shift. The moment stoicism enters the room. Stoicism doesn't teach us to fight insult with insult. It teaches us to see clearly, to anchor ourselves not in how others see us, but in who we know ourselves to be. Because let's be real, if someone's compliment makes you feel smaller instead of seen, that's not admiration. That's manipulation. The Stoic doesn't need applause to feel worthy. We draw strength from reason, not from reactions, from principles, not from praise. As the philosopher Seneca said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." That backhanded compliment, it's adversity, a subtle one, but it's a test, not of your worth, but of your clarity. And your job isn't to fix the person who threw it at you. You don't need to correct them, explain how it made you feel, or beg for better treatment. You need to stand firm in your truth. Remember what you've overcome. Remember what you've built without their approval. Your worth doesn't increase when someone finally sees it. It becomes undeniable when you live like it's already true. So when someone tries to compliment you in a way that confuses you, pause. Don't react. Don't justify. Don't explain. Just ask yourself, is this about me, or is it about their need to feel superior? And that clarity, that moment of inner stillness, that's where power begins. Because someone who truly values you doesn't compliment you with conditions. They lift you up without pushing you down first. They celebrate you without reminding you how little they expected of you. And if they don't, walk on. Not with bitterness, but with calm, quiet strength. You don't need their distorted mirror to see your own reflection. You already know who you are. You've earned the right to speak boldly, live freely, and love yourself without hesitation. So the next time you hear a compliment that feels more like a trap than a gift, don't get pulled in. Just smile, not because you believe it, but because you've outgrown it. Have you ever tried to tell someone how their actions hurt you, only to walk away feeling like you were the one who messed up? You came in with honesty, calm, clear, respectful. You said something like, "Hey, when you did that, it really hurt me." And instead of listening, they twisted the whole thing around. Suddenly, they're the victim. Suddenly, you're too sensitive, overreacting, or always finding problems. Sound familiar? This is one of the most exhausting patterns you'll ever face: the narcissist's refusal to take real responsibility. They don't say, "I was wrong." They don't say, "I see how that affected you." Instead, they deflect. They rationalize. They find someone else to blame: their ex, their childhood, society, stress, you. Because for them, being wrong isn't just uncomfortable, it's unbearable. Admitting fault would crack the perfect image they've built of themselves, and they'll do anything to protect it. And here's what makes it so damaging. Over time, it doesn't just erode trust, it erodes your sense of reality. You start asking yourself, maybe it really was my fault. Maybe I was too harsh, too emotional, too demanding. But here's the truth. You weren't wrong for bringing up your feelings. You weren't wrong for wanting respect. You weren't wrong for asking for accountability. You were just up against someone who sees accountability as an attack. And this, my friend, is not just miscommunication. It's emotional warfare. The more you try to explain, to justify, to prove your point, the deeper you sink into their game. Because here's the twist. They don't want resolution. They want control. And if they can make you question your reality, they never have to face their own. But this is where Stoicism offers a lifeline. Epictetus said, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. That doesn't mean it's your fault. It means you always have a choice, to engage or to stay above the noise, to chase justice through chaos or to protect your peace through clarity. Because the Stoic understands, truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs to stand. You don't win by arguing with someone who rewrites the story every time you speak. You win by refusing to audition for their version of reality. And yes, you'll feel the pull. You'll want to defend yourself, to make them see what they did, to get them to finally admit, you're right, I hurt you. But they won't. Not because they can't, but because they won't risk the vulnerability that real accountability requires. So what do? You stop playing the courtroom game. You stop providing evidence for your pain. You stop trying to convince someone who benefits from your confusion. And instead, you do something far more powerful. You take responsibility, not for their behavior, but for your response. You reclaim your clarity. You stand in your truth even if no one claps. You walk away not to punish them, but to protect your mind. Because here's a truth that changes everything. Backhand index pointing right, you don't need their confession to find closure. Backhand index pointing right, you don't need their apology to move on. You only need you grounded, awake, and aligned with your own values. That's the Stoic path. Not to fix others, but to govern the self. So the next time someone dodges responsibility and blames you for setting a boundary, pause, breathe, see it for what it is, and then without anger, without drama, walk in your truth, because your peace is not a negotiation, and the people who belong in your life won't run from responsibility. They'll rise to meet it just like you do. At first, it feels like magic. They say all the right things. They notice the little details. They make you feel like the most fascinating person in the room, and you start to think, wow, someone finally sees me. Maybe this time it's real. The beginning is a dream. They give you the kind of attention that feels like destiny. They're generous with compliments, thoughtful, engaged. And for a while, you start to let your guard down. You begin to trust. But then something changes. It's subtle at first. Their sweet tone cools just a little. The compliments start to come with strings attached. Their warmth becomes something you have to earn, something that disappears the moment you step outside their expectations. What once felt like love now feels like performance. You begin adjusting your tone so you don't offend them. You praise them even when it feels forced. You walk on eggshells just to keep the magic alive. Sound familiar? This, right here, is when charm becomes control. See, not all charm is authentic. Sometimes charm is a mask, carefully crafted to win your trust, so it can be used against you later. And here's the tricky part. Because it started so beautifully, you doubt yourself when it shifts. You tell yourself, maybe I'm just being too sensitive. Maybe I'm the one changing. But deep down, something inside you knows, this isn't the same energy anymore. So how do you tell the difference between genuine affection and charm used as manipulation? Time. Stoicism teaches us something powerful. Time reveals what intensity conceals. In other words, don't just listen to the words, watch the consistency. How do they act when things don't go their way? How do they treat people who have nothing to offer them? Do they still show kindness when no one's watching? The Stoic doesn't fall for grand entrances. The Stoic observes, patiently, quietly, because truth doesn't rush and neither should we. Real love doesn't pressure. Real connection doesn't confuse. And real people, they don't withdraw affection as punishment. When charm starts to feel like expectation, like something you have to perform for, that's your signal. But here's the empowering part. You don't need to confront them with rage. You don't need to call them out or explain yourself endlessly. You simply step back. You let their energy pass by like wind around a mountain. You choose silence over reaction, clarity over confusion, and observation over emotional entanglement. Because when someone's affection comes with conditions, that's not love, it's control wrapped in flattery. And you were never meant to live under someone else's script. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like you were losing someone simply because you stopped overgiving, over-explaining, or overperforming? Good. That wasn't loss. That was truth revealing. So if someone's charm once felt like sunlight, but now feels like a spotlight, if their praise has turned into pressure, if you feel more managed than loved, it's time to return to yourself. Because you don't need their permission to feel whole. You don't need to win their attention back. You don't need to keep dancing for affection that was never meant to last. You were never the audience. You were never the supporting act. You are the soul, complete, steady, and whole. And the moment you stop performing is the moment you begin to live. Have you ever told someone, "That really hurt me," and they looked at you with a smirk and said, "You're too sensitive"? Have you ever recalled something vividly, a promise broken, an argument that shook you, only for them to say, "That never happened"? That's not just denial, that's not forgetfulness. That's gaslighting, one of the most dangerous forms of emotional manipulation. And here's the thing, it doesn't show up like a slap. It shows up like a whisper, slowly, subtly, until you're not sure what's real anymore. At first, you question the situation. Then you question your feelings. Eventually, you question your sanity. You start asking yourself, am I overreacting? Maybe I am too emotional. What if I really can't trust my own memory? And that's exactly the goal. Because the moment you stop trusting yourself, you start trusting them. You lean on their version of reality instead of your own. And slowly but surely, they take control not of your life, but of your mind. But here's what Stoicism offers: a light in the fog. The Stoics teach us that clarity is our greatest weapon, the ability to separate emotion from truth, narrative from fact, manipulation from meaning. See, gaslighting works by exploiting your desire for peace. You want harmony. You want to believe the best in people. You want to avoid conflict, especially with someone you love. So you bend, you shrink, you soften your truth to keep the connection. But here's what Stoicism reminds us. Peace built on self-betrayal is not peace, it's quiet suffering. The Stoic mind doesn't abandon its inner compass just because someone else is uncomfortable with where it points. So what do you do when someone tries to rewrite your reality? You don't scream, you don't beg, you don't spiral. You anchor yourself in a simple, powerful truth. I felt hurt. That happened. I remember I was there. My experience matters, even if they deny it. You don't need their permission to honor what you lived through. You don't need them to validate your emotions for them to be valid. You don't even need them to agree for you to move forward. You just need you steady, clear, awake. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If someone shows me I'm wrong, I'll gladly change. But until then, I will stay true to my convictions." That's the Stoic posture, open to reason, closed to manipulation. So the next time someone twists your words, repeat what you said calmly. without defensiveness. If they deny your emotions, name them anyway, not to argue, not to convince, but to ground yourself. And if it feels like you're walking through quicksand, overanalyzing every word, questioning your worth, wondering if you're the problem, pause. That's not love, that's erosion. And your soul wasn't meant to be chipped away in the name of keeping the peace. You have a right to your reality. You have a right to your memory. You have a right to say, "This happened, I felt it, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise just to make someone else comfortable." Because if your peace depends on getting someone to admit the truth, you'll always be at their mercy. But if your peace comes from staying rooted in what you know to be true, no one can shake it. So if you're being gaslit right now, don't panic, don't explode, don't prove, just pause, breathe, observe, name it, and step out of the fog. You don't need to fight their illusion. You just need to return to your clarity. Because the moment you stop needing their version of the story to feel confident in yours is the moment you become free. You don't always notice it at first. In fact, in the beginning, you might even feel drawn in. They tell you their stories, their pain, their struggles, their chaos. They pull you close with intensity, like you've been chosen to understand them in a way no one else ever has. And maybe for a moment that feels like connection. Maybe it even feels like purpose. But over time, something shifts. You walk away from conversations with a strange heaviness in your chest, a tightness in your shoulders. Your thoughts feel foggy, your mood tense, and you can't quite explain why, but every interaction seems to cost you more than you expected. That's not just stress. That's not being a good friend. That's emotional energy drain, and for a narcissist, it's not accidental. It's the goal. You see, narcissists don't just seek attention. They feed on energy, your empathy, your presence, your willingness to listen and support. But not in a mutual way. They don't receive it with gratitude. They extract it like fuel. They'll confide in you not to heal, but to bind you. They'll share their pain, not to connect, but to keep you orbiting around their needs. And when you set a boundary, they get cold, distant, maybe even cruel, because in their world, you're not a person, you're a source. A power outlet they plug into whenever they're empty. But here's where stoicism changes the game. The stoic doesn't give their energy away like loose change. They know their attention, presence, and emotional space are sacred. Not because they're selfish, but because they're wise. Epictetus said, "Keep your attention focused entirely on what is truly your own concern." And your energy, that's your concern, not theirs. So how do you know when someone is draining you? Start asking yourself, do I feel clearer or more confused after spending time with them? Do I feel respected or responsible for their mood? Do I feel uplifted or like I need to recover? Because your body knows even when your mind is trying to be polite. Sometimes we ignore the signs. We tell ourselves, they just need someone to talk to. We say they've been through so much. But over time, we lose something subtle but critical, our clarity, our center, our inner peace. Stoicism reminds us, kindness without boundaries isn't virtue, it's surrender. You are allowed to say, I don't have the energy for this right now. I care about you, but I need space today. I choose my peace over this pattern. And that care, that choice isn't cruel, it's essential. Because when your emotional space is constantly occupied by someone else's chaos, you stop hearing your own truth. You lose the strength to pursue your own path, and you forget what it feels like to simply be, without explaining, fixing, or managing someone else's world. The Stoic doesn't shut others out. They open wisely. They give from abundance, not depletion. They support without losing themselves. So if someone leaves you feeling drained again and again, don't ignore it. Don't gaslight yourself. And don't confuse exhaustion with loyalty. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step away. Not because you've stopped caring, but because you finally started caring for yourself. Your energy is not a debt they're owed. Your presence is not a reward they're entitled to. And your peace is not up for negotiation. So the next time you feel that subtle fatigue creeping in, after yet another conversation where they took more than they gave, ask yourself, do I feel drained or do I feel free? Because when someone truly values you, they won't just take from your light. They'll help you protect it. Have you ever been in a relationship, romantic, professional, even family, where someone seemed to expect everything from you, but gave you almost nothing in return? They wanted your loyalty, your time, your attention, your praise, and sometimes even your silence. But when it was their turn to show up, to give back, to carry even a piece of the emotional weight, they vanished. It starts small. You run the extra mile. You accommodate, you forgive. You tell yourself it's okay, they're just going through something. But over time, a quiet imbalance starts to form, and it drains you. Because they expect devotion like it's a right, but see reciprocity like it's an insult. And if you ask for it, if you say, hey, I need more from you, or I don't feel supported, suddenly you're the bad guy. They say you're too demanding, too sensitive, never satisfied, ungrateful, and you start to question yourself. Maybe I am asking for too much. Maybe love means giving without expecting. But here's the truth. Love is not a one-way transaction. And friendship, that's not a stage where one person performs and the other just claps. When someone feels entitled to your energy, your effort, your empathy, but refuses to contribute anything real in return, that's not love. That's emotional entitlement. And entitlement at its core is a form of inner poverty. It's the belief that the world owes you something, without the willingness to build or earn it. The Stoics saw this clearly. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." People who constantly crave attention, admiration, and care, without the self-awareness or discipline to give any of it back, are not strong. They're hollow, and if you stay too long in their orbit, they'll convince you that overgiving is noble, while they keep collecting. But here's what the Stoic knows. Where there is no reciprocity, effort must be withdrawn, not out of spite, not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. Because continuing to give, to explain, to fix, in a space where your value is only acknowledged when it's convenient, is not strength, it's self-abandonment. So what do? You stop proving. You stop auditioning. You stop trying to earn what should have been mutual from the start. You let your absence speak what your words no longer need to say. And here's the best part. You don't have to fight. You don't have to convince them of your worth. You don't even have to explain why you're done. Because people who demand more than they give will always find a way to make you feel wrong for setting limits. But your peace, that's not up for negotiation. So ask yourself, am I in a relationship or am I in a transaction? Are they building with me or simply benefiting from me? Because true love, real connection, is mutual effort. It's showing up when it's inconvenient. It's giving without keeping score, but not without awareness. The Stoic path teaches us not to become hard-hearted, but to become clear, to know the difference between generosity and servitude, between supporting someone and being used. So the next time someone makes you feel guilty for setting a boundary, ask yourself honestly, are they upset because you're being unfair, or because you're finally becoming harder to exploit? You are not here to pour endlessly into empty cups. You are here to live, love, and give from overflow, and before you know it, you're no longer talking about what happened. You're now defending your tone, your timing, your right to even speak. This is one of the clearest patterns you'll see in narcissistic behavior, an inability to handle critique without collapsing into chaos. To them, feedback isn't information. It's a threat, a crack in the perfect image they've built. And cracks, they can't afford that. So they lash out, not because you were cruel, but because your truth made them uncomfortable. Let's be real, we all have egos. Nobody loves being called out, but healthy people, they pause, they reflect. They might get uncomfortable, sure, but they still listen. Narcissists don't do that. They rewrite the story. Suddenly, you're not sharing your feelings. You're attacking them. You're never satisfied. You always find something wrong. Sound familiar? It's like trying to offer water to someone drowning, only to have them throw it back in your face and say you're the reason they're underwater. But here's where the stoic path saves your sanity. A stoic knows this. Your calm is not the cause of their chaos. Your truth doesn't need permission to be valid. Epictetus taught that when someone provokes you, your mind is always complicit if you allow it to be disturbed. That doesn't mean the explosion is your fault. It means you get to decide whether you step into the fire or step back into your peace. So how do we hold our ground when someone reacts explosively to something as simple as truth? We stay rooted, in clarity, in integrity. In our calm, we don't escalate, we don't shrink, we don't over-explain. We simply remember the truth doesn't require a dramatic defense. It only requires a witness. That witness is you. Now you might feel the urge to make them understand. You might think, if I just say it differently, maybe they'll hear me. If I stay calm, maybe they'll finally get it. But here's the hard truth. People who explode at honest feedback aren't looking for understanding. They're looking for control. Your truth threatens the illusion they've built. And when people build their identity around never being wrong, they will see every challenge as betrayal. But you don't have to carry that. Your job is not to manage their ego. Your job is to stay loyal to your values. So next time you speak your truth and someone erupts, pause, let the storm pass without stepping into it. Let them spin. Let the noise be theirs, because your voice, it doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. It just has to be clear. You don't need their approval to speak. You don't need their agreement to set a boundary. You don't need their calm to keep yours. The Stoic chooses inner stability over outer validation. So if you've ever walked away from a simple conversation feeling like you just survived a battlefield, remember, it wasn't about what you said, it was about what they couldn't handle. And the most powerful thing you can do, not react, not fight, not fix, just stand, still, calm, grounded in truth. Because when you stop engaging with emotional firestorms, you stop getting burned, means you for having them. It might start subtly. A favor that didn't feel like a choice. A conversation that pushed past your comfort zone. A demand disguised as a request. You go along with it once, twice, 10 times trying to keep the peace. Until one day you say, enough. And that's when things shift. Suddenly you are the problem. You're too distant. You've changed. You're making things harder than they need to be. But here's the truth. They never had a problem with your boundary. They had a problem with your ability to enforce it. Because narcissists don't see boundaries as healthy, they see them as rejection. And rejection threatens their control, so they challenge it, then twist the narrative, and finally blame you for daring to defend your own space. But this is where Stoicism gives you the clarity you've been searching for. A Stoic understands. Boundaries are not walls, they are windows. They don't block connection, they create the structure where real connection can actually grow. Without boundaries, there's no respect. Without respect, there's no trust. And without trust, well, you're not in a relationship. You're in a performance. The Stoic doesn't apologize for protecting their soul. They don't argue about whether their limits are reasonable. They simply stand. So the next time someone crosses a line you clearly set, and then makes you feel guilty for drawing it in the first place, remember this: You are not selfish for having needs. You are not cold for choosing peace. And you are not the villain for refusing to abandon yourself just to keep someone else comfortable. Ask yourself, am I setting this boundary to punish someone or to protect my own well-being? If the answer is the latter, you don't owe them a long explanation. You don't need to soften the blow. You don't have to prove your pain, because here's the hard truth. The more you explain a boundary to someone who keeps crossing it, the more they learn how to manipulate your reasoning. So instead of debating, just return to what's yours, your values, your clarity, your stillness. As Epictetus said, never suppress a generous impulse, but don't let it override reason. Being generous doesn't mean saying yes to everything. Being compassionate doesn't mean becoming a doormat. You are allowed to step away from conversations that dishonor your peace, to close the door on people who mistake access for entitlement, to choose yourself without guilt, without shame, and without permission. Because when someone keeps pushing past your limits, they're not trying to connect, they're trying to control. And every time you shrink yourself to keep the peace, you reinforce their belief that they're entitled to parts of you they were never meant to hold. But the Stoic doesn't play that game. The Stoic knows your boundaries don't drive the wrong people away. They reveal them, so don't fear the fallout. If someone walks away because you finally honored your own space, let them go, because anyone who sees your self-respect as a threat was never truly interested in your well-being to begin with. You don't lose yourself all at once. It doesn't happen with one big moment. There's no dramatic turning point, no flashing red light that says, "Hey, you're disappearing." It happens quietly. It starts with a small compromise. You hold your tongue during a conversation. You laugh at something that hurt. You say yes to something you didn't feel good about just to avoid a fight. And then it happens again and again, until one day you don't recognize your own voice anymore. You don't remember what you love, what you believe, what actually matters to you, not them. You stop living from the inside out, and you start reacting to someone else's version of reality. Their moods shape your day. Their expectations become your routine. Their validation feels like oxygen, and without it, you can't breathe. Sound familiar? This isn't just emotional exhaustion. This is something deeper. This is the slow erosion of your identity. And it's one of the most dangerous signs that you're in a relationship, romantic or otherwise, that isn't built on truth. It's built on control. But here's the good news. You can come home to yourself, even if you've been gone for a while. The Stoics remind us that freedom, real, lasting, internal freedom, doesn't begin when someone else changes. It begins when you look within. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up if you will ever dig." So dig. Ask yourself, what am I tolerating that violates my peace? What values have I set aside in the name of keeping this relationship afloat? What parts of me have I silenced just to be acceptable, agreeable, or safe? Because here's the truth. If being yourself threatens the relationship, it was never a safe relationship to begin with. You were never meant to shrink to fit inside someone else's comfort zone. You were never meant to disappear so that they could shine. You were never meant to trade your truth for temporary approval. The Stoic doesn't fight to be understood. They fight to live in alignment. And sometimes, the most radical act of self-respect is saying no, even if your voice shakes, saying enough, even if no one claps for you, reclaiming your time, your boundaries, your breath, even if it means walking away. It's not easy, but losing yourself is harder, because the longer you abandon your center, the more you start living in fragments. You lose confidence, you lose clarity, and eventually you forget what peace even feels like. But here's your reminder, that person you thought you lost, They're still in there, not broken, just buried, under someone else's expectations, under years of people-pleasing, under the fear of not being liked or loved or chosen. But you don't need permission to return. You don't need their blessing to begin again. You just need one thing: the courage to stop apologizing for your truth. The Stoic knows that clarity doesn't come with time, it comes with courage. Not the loud, dramatic kind, but the quiet kind. The kind that says, I may be misunderstood, but I will not be manipulated. I may walk alone, but I will walk in truth. So if you feel like you've been fading, shrinking, compromising in ways that no longer feel right, this is your invitation to stop waiting, to stop explaining, to stop hoping they'll suddenly get it, and to start coming home to yourself, breath by breath, value by value, boundary by boundary. Because the relationship that matters most is the one you have with your own soul, and no relationship is worth sacrificing that. Me's rooted, grounded, unshaken, because you don't win against manipulation by fighting louder. You don't reclaim your dignity by trying to make someone see what they refuse to see. You win when you stop playing their game altogether. You win by walking away without drama, by reclaiming your peace without asking for permission, by choosing to no longer trade your energy for their approval. And maybe that's the hardest part: not lashing out, not explaining your worth, but letting go with quiet certainty because you finally understand. It is not your job to fix what you didn't break. You deserve relationships that are built on mutual respect, not manipulation. Love that doesn't ask you to shrink. Friendship that doesn't require performance. Connection that doesn't cost you your clarity. So protect your energy. That means learning when to say no without guilt. It means honoring your boundaries even if others do like them. It means stepping back when the space you're in begins to dim your light. And above all, it means choosing yourself. Not once, not just when it's convenient, but consistently. Choosing your values, choosing your peace. Choosing to live a life where you are not constantly reacting, but intentionally responding from a place of truth. That's what Stoicism gives us, not just philosophy, but a compass. A way to navigate the chaos without becoming part of it. And if you've ever asked yourself, am I too sensitive? Am I overreacting? Is it selfish to walk away? Let me tell you, no, it's not selfish to protect your soul. It's not weak to need peace, and it's not too much to ask for respect. So here's your reminder and your permission if you need it. You are allowed to stop dancing for approval. You are allowed to stop explaining your boundaries. You are allowed to outgrow the versions of love that ask you to betray yourself. Because real strength isn't found in controlling others. It's found in